Welcome back to Gene and Roger Talk Movies. It's one of my favorite episodes ever, even though we haven't recorded it yet, because once again, Gene is gone on vacation, which gives me free reign to do movies that Gene doesn't want to do. And I know over the years we've talked about Silent Night, Deadly Night, and how much Gene hates this movie. He hasn't even seen the whole thing. But with him being out, I've asked Melissa Klein, our friend, first-time podcaster on our little show, to join us. Melissa, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me, Roger. Appreciate it.
Well, we'll see, because Melissa, you watched Silent Night, Deadly Night for the first time just yesterday, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so we're going to get right into it. This movie, very controversial when it came out in 1984, was actually pulled from theaters because all these parent groups that want to just protect the children were protesting, and the studio caved to their protests and pulled this film. So didn't have a huge theatrical run, but has lived on in infamy since then. But let's get right into it. Melissa, what are your initial thoughts of this one?
Okay, well, I'm going to start with saying I am so glad I never saw this movie as a child. I understand why it was banned. I'm going to say, first off, Santa and horror absolutely do not mix, in my opinion. I loved the grandpa character at the beginning. Yes. I was really into that guy. I was a little disappointed I didn't see him again later in the movie, but I love the exchange between the kid and him. It was really scary, the way he talked to his grandson secretly, and I thought that character was perfectly, that actor did great, that kid actor did great. Agreed. With that whole exchange there.
Yep.
I loved, my favorite part about this movie is what I'm going to talk about first. It was nostalgic for me. I love 70s. I love 80s horror films, all films in that. So that sucked me in right away, and it kept my attention. I loved the car they were driving in at the beginning with the family. It really captured that whole 70s moment where they're in that station wagon, and he's talking about Christmas and everything. I really loved that stuff. I loved, my favorite was the characters in the toy store, the staff. That was great. I love the guy with the black hair, super common character for the 70s, always the guy that's always, breaking all the rules and drinking in the back room. I love that. Extremely entertaining. I'm absolutely not a big slasher fan, so it was horribly graphic. It was horrible to watch all those scenes. I had to block my eyes for those things. But the innocence, I think, of all three characters of each age he was were perfect as far as the actors goes, because they really all were able to have this innocence where they did come off as victims to me, like I bought it.
Right.
That, they were, didn't start out that way. They weren't that horrifying. They were really innocent children that were victimized. I really bought that for the story.
Right. And that's part of the greatness of this film. I mean, I know it's a slasher, it's a cheap little slasher movie, but underneath the surface of this slasher movie are really elements that are relevant today. This young child witnesses both of his parents getting killed by this guy dressed in a Santa Claus suit. He gets sent to the orphanage, which of course is run by this sadistic nun who has one of the greatest lines in the whole film, where she's like, punishment is absolute, punishment is necessary, and all this stuff.
Yes.
But there's this other nun who is basically saying, look, this kid has some significant trauma that is especially relevant around the holidays, and you're not recognizing that. You're punishing him for things that are a result of his trauma.
Right.
And at one point, she even drags him to sit on Santa's lap, and of course, he punches the guy and all this. So there's this whole buildup of his youth spent in this orphanage, where it is the wrong treatment model for a person with this level of trauma.
Right.
And so the movie, it could be just this cheap slasher movie, but there are some underlying themes here that really set it apart from your traditional slasher movie where, this terrible thing happened to me by these wacky teens when I was a kid, and now I'm going to kill them all. No, this is different. And I especially like when he gets older, and this one nun has kind of been his mentor. She's the one that really understands his trauma, and she gets him a job. Of course, where does he get the job? It's a toy store around Christmas time, right? And at some point, the department store Santa is going to call in sick. and they're going to put him in the suit.
I was still surprised when they did it. I was still surprised, and that's one thing that kept me watching the movie too. I couldn't predict it, but I loved when he punched that Santa out. That was a great moment. I was hoping he would choose, kind of the good side at the end. I had some hope, believe it or not. But the trauma he experienced was horrible enough. But then at the end, when the whole orphanage he created all these new trauma children, right? Witnessing killing the wrong Santa. And I was blown away also by the cop that just pulled his gun out right in front of all these Catholic children. And you see, the aftermath of the blood and everything on the kid. And the nun actually has the guts to come out and yell at the kid, "Get inside. Right. What are you doing out there?" And he's running in with the blood on his shirt.
Well, and that scene right there is one of the beautiful scenes as far as slasher horror movies go.
Yes.
I full disclosure, this is one of my 2 films that I watch every Christmas day. I watched it earlier this year just for this podcast, but normally it's Christmas Vacation, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and then the nightcap is Silent Night, Deadly Night, primarily because of this scene that we're going to talk about. The police are finally involved, and they recognize that there is this homicidal Santa Claus running around killing people. And they deduce that, well, he's going to go back to this orphanage to kill this nun that he hates so much. And so there's this great scene where the police are rushing to the orphanage. But the orphanage, every Christmas Day, they have somebody dress up as Santa and come to the orphanage and spread joy and cheer to the children, the orphans, right?
Yes, because they were all really good all year.
Right. And so there's this great scene where here's this Santa coming towards the orphanage, and these kids are all excited. These orphans, they're all excited. One moment of joy in this orphanage run by this sadistic nun, right? And they're coming outside to greet Santa, and this cop pulls up. He's like, "Drop it. Get away from him, drop it." And the Santa's approaching these children, and he unloads his clip into the Santa, drops him in front of the horrified children, blood all over him. And then you realize later, because this other nun, the good nun, the nun who wants to kind of be mentoring and understanding of this kid's trauma, is driving with the sheriff to the site, and the cop that's just gunned him down is like, "Oh, wait. This dude's like 50-something years old or something. This isn't our guy."
Right.
And the sheriff's like, "Well, how could this even happen?" And the nun's like, "Oh, it's Father O'Malley or whatever. He's deaf. He couldn't hear him." And then the next scene is Santa's boots as he's getting loaded into the morgue truck, and all the tragedy.
They shove him in there so quick too, and she hops right in the front seat. And then I think one of the next scenes is one of the officer that shot him is talking to the nun, going, "Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
I know.
Sorry."
And she's like, and then Mother Superior's like, "I think you've caused more harm than good here."
Yeah, I'm sorry about that too.
And I just think the blackness of that humor is just so great. I just so look forward to that scene, and it just cracks me up every time, even though it's a scene of great horror.
Right.
But just,
I agree.
Gal, you're just piling it on so thick right there at that scene.
Yes.
The level of violence in this film is pretty high. There's sequences here. I mean, Linnea Quigley is in this, and of course, I don't think Melissa Klein would know Linnea Quigley at all, but horror film fans, we know her. She's always the person that takes her top off and then gets killed in various random horror movies.
That makes more sense.
Right, and so she actually gets in an extremely graphic scene impaled on like deer antlers or something like that.
Yeah, through the cracks of my fingers when I was looking, I could barely see it.
Yeah, so the kill scenes in this for a slasher are way over the top and satisfying for a slasher horror film fan. And I just think the overall tone, it can be really nasty and mean-spirited as far as what's happening on screen, but there's also this level of social commentary about dealing with trauma, and there's right ways and wrong ways.
Right.
And also I think of the 80s too, where, hey, what's wrong with you with your trauma? Pull your bootstraps up and just deal with it.
Right.
I'm going to set you on this Santa Claus.
Yeah.
And not understanding that there's all these
and I
triggers.
Think there was a moment where when he was first the Santa and the parents were complimenting him. Wow, he really deals with those kids good.
Oh, yes.
And he was calming the girl, telling the girl in a super creepy way to calm down. And they're like, wow, way to go, Santa.
Well, because he's like, because he's totally bought into the whole sister Mother Superior is like
Right.
punishment is necessary, punishment is
Yes.
absolute. If you're naughty, this has to happen. And
Right.
that kid is squirming on his lap, and he's like, "Man, I'm going to punish." Well, the exact quote I think was, "You need to calm down, or I'm going to punish you
Yes.
severely."
Yes. Yes.
And then it cuts to the parent. Oh, how he's got these kids under control with his stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
But I do like your point, Melissa, about the end when he does get finally gunned down inside the orphanage, about to axe Mother Superior, and how we've just spawned a whole new level of trauma here with I don't know, there's about 20 something other orphans there, and then of course the one orphan looks at Mother Superior and is like naughty, and so he's already kind of cracked.
So how many remakes are there of this?
Well, and that's the thing. Silent Night, Deadly Night stands by itself.
Right.
There's all these sequels to it. The sequels, Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 has the infamous Garbage Day line, which will mean nothing to Melissa, but those of you who know this series will know all about that. And even like Mickey Rooney is in one of them at some point. And so the only one that really matters as far as it's a legitimate attempt at a film is this one.
Okay.
The rest are just kind of stupid. There was a quote-unquote reboot of this called Silent Night, I think, and I don't remember who was in that, but it was nowhere near the level. I think this movie is so unique, it could only be made at that time.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that they got away with a significant amount of graphic violence, which was, usually heavily edited. There's also the uncut DVD of this out there where you can see a lot of extra stuff that was cut out. Some of which is dialogue sequences. There's a great dialogue sequence, which I don't think you saw, Melissa, in the cut you saw, where the drunk toy store owner, right? Because after the holidays and they've locked the toy store up, they're all kind of having a little party there. He's basically telling this kid who's dressed in Santa, who's about to go off, you know what you need to do. You need to go out there. You got a busy night ahead of you. Just go do it, kid. Go do it. And that kind of leads him into this, oh, wait, I know what Santa does. He kills people, so I got to go do that now and things like that. But again, I will go back to, I do think it's a lot smarter than many people give it credit for, primarily because of the trauma aspect and what can go on with untreated trauma. I mean, obviously, no one's going to dress up in Santa and start killing people, but just there's these different versions where they're trying to deal with his trauma. And clearly the Mother Superior's method is not helping on any level. No. And she's not even giving a minute's thought to this other nun who's like, we really need to get more inside his head and do some actual therapeutic counseling here. And she's having none of it.
And as a middle-aged person, I think we can all identify with that character, the Catholic nun. Mm-hmm. That was a real thing and portrayed in a lot of movies and in real life. So that was definitely believable.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I just, the whole movie, like I say, really enjoy this film, even though it's a band, parent groups, those 80s parents, they didn't want your heavy metal music, Tipper Gore and all that, and they don't want your killer Santa movies, but this is probably the best killer Santa movie there is. So.
Okay, well, I'm going to take your word for that because I probably won't watch another one, but I want to shout out to the kids in this movie. I love their characters. I love the one other girl where he handed the switchblade to at the end and her innocence there when he walked by her with the axe and she just didn't even react. She just stood there. That was a classic. I love that. And then also the robber at the beginning, the random guy, right? That was my disappointed part where I wanted to follow the original grandpa at the beginning scene. Mm-hmm. I was hoping he was going to be the guy, but it was just some random guy at the gas station, I was like, oh, dang, this guy's kind of boring.
I don't think they could have done with grandpa. He was a little too old to be moving around too much.
Well, he was a fascinating character that I wanted to know more about, but...
Well, and it definitely sets that scene because they're basically driving to... the old folks' home where Grandpa is. Grandpa clearly is suffering from dementia or something else that is preventing him from speaking anymore. But maybe Grandpa has one up his sleeve where he actually can still communicate because he does communicate directly with the little boy who becomes the killer Santa, basically saying, Christmas is the scariest night of the year and
I see that.
All this. And so it really set the tone for that moving forward. But you're right. His performance is great in that scene, and I don't know if he's ever done any other acting jobs at all, but he nailed it with this old guy for sure. And I also like that you brought up the little girl because the killer Santa goes in, he the little girl's being babysat by Linnea Quigley, of all people. And then she, of course, as all babysitters from the 80s did, they call their boyfriend over when they're hanging out in the house.
Of course.
Both of them get killed. And then Santa, he's getting ready to leave the house. And then the little girl comes out. Oh, Santa, Santa, Santa. And if there's any tension in this movie, it's right here, because how far is this director going to really go? I mean, we've just seen a woman get impaled on antlers.
Right.
And now so there's this dialogue sequence between the killer Santa. He's got blood all over him too, and the girl doesn't seem to notice that. But she's a little girl, maybe 6, 5, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And he's questioning her. He's like, have you been good all year? And you're like, oh man, if she says anything wrong or anything out of
Right.
other than I've been good, he's going to kill her, because he's pulling in his little box cutter and all this. And he's like, have you really been good? Are you sure? And she keeps to her story that she's been good. So he gifts her the bloody box
The weapon.
cutter. Yeah.
What a guy.
Yeah. So, I it would have been a whole different movie had they had a murder sequence right there with that small child.
Right. Yeah. You're right.
You can get away with it in films like When Evil Lurks. You can kill children in that one because you've said it in a certain way and it's an artistic thing.
Right.
A cheap little slasher. You don't want to be killing children.
And it still gave you those feelings for his innocence as a child too, getting taken away.
He didn't want to necessarily be what he became, but there was no one helping him come through that trauma.
No.
And here's what you got in this particular film. Anything else to say about this one?
Nope. I think I've said all I'm going to say.
Okay, Melissa, I am so pleased that you agreed to do Silent Night, Deadly Night and join us on this podcast.
All right. Thanks.
Just full disclosure, I occasionally will tell Melissa to watch some of the movies that we've reviewed. And she's many times very much into those movies. And so it was like, well, Gene's not here. My usual go-to Tyken's not here. So let's see if Klein wants to watch Silent Night, Deadly Night. And she's like, oh yeah, I'll give it a shot. See what happens.
Well, I appreciate you asking me. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Very good. Well, we will catch you next week. We're actually doing Hereditary next week with Sarah and David, who joined us last year around Christmas for the Green Room. So come check us for that, and we'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.